Good morning, everyone. My name is Rana Al-Mzari, and I would like to welcome you all to the NLI Conference Series 2022. We have an amazing conference for you today, but before we get started, here is an introduction about our company.
The National Leadership Institute, or NLI, is an institute fully owned by Nest, a national company for educational services and training, which is a subsidiary of NTEC, the National Technology Enterprises Company, a governmental entity owned by Kuwait Sovereign Fund, the KIA. Our main purpose is directly linked to NTEC's core mandate, which is to transfer knowledge and technology into Kuwait and the region. As a fully owned governmental company, with our international experience in education, we have a unique ability to fulfill our mandate and our clients' educational and training needs. Our governmental credentials have given us the flexibility to work directly with many state-owned entities and private companies within Kuwait and in the region. Our international experience has also helped us develop an academic and industry-based network second to none. We have had the pleasure to work and partner with some of the world's most renowned institutions, such as London Business School, Harvard Business School, Imperial Business School, King's College London, Boeing, Google, and many, many more. Over the years, our experience and diverse team have delivered short programs for institutions like Kuwait University, KOC, and KISA, with the University of Texas at Austin, and a long-term corporate development program for KPC and its subsidiaries, with a consortium of partners, including London Business School. Our experience and network have given us the ability to assess organizational needs and customize programs tailored to organizational or individual needs. Our independent positioning allows us to put your needs at the forefront, develop learning journeys with components and models from different institutions, giving you the best customized outcome. We would then underpin the learning journey with executive and group coaching that would help to transfer the knowledge learned back into the business. Also, with the current pandemic in mind, we are able to safely and effectively deliver programs in class, virtually, and in a model. Our goal at NLI is to be part of your development and holistic journey at an individual and organizational level. We want to support you in creating the culture that your organization needs and deserves. To find out more about our services and how we can be part of your journey, please visit our website or contact us directly. Thank you for choosing the National Leadership Institute.
Today's conference, Hybrid the Future of Work, will be presented by Graham Codrington with special guest Ahmed Marafi and moderated by Rahul Datfali. Graham Codrington is an expert on the work and multi-generational workplaces. He speaks on the tides of change, disruptive forces shaping the new world of work in the next decade, institutional change, demographics, the environment, and shifting social values. Ahmed Marafi, the co-founder and CEO of Coded, the first coding in the Middle East. The moderator for the conferences will be Rahul Datfali, a highly accomplished facilitator, educator, and practitioner who was Regional Director of Executive Education for London Business School. He has over 25 years of global experience. We are proud to announce that the NLI Conference Series 2022 is officially sponsored by National Bank of Kuwait and Zain Telecom. We hope you enjoy today's conference. And for now, Rahul, I hand it over to you.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Let me add my welcome to today's webinar, which I promise you is going to be truly fascinating, given that we're thinking about the future of work, how we actually skill ourselves up and tool ourselves up to be successful in the future. Remember, these sessions are really designed to be provocative. They're designed to challenge our thinking and challenge the status quo, especially in these changing times post-COVID. I think it's particularly interesting at this time because many organizations, particularly in the US, big financial institutions have been asking their employees to come back, and yet they've been challenged by their employees pushing back. So today, we'll be having a debate with Ahmed and with Graham to think about how do we build business models and employee models to actually engage our workforce going forward. I think the key thing is that with COVID, one of the key things about COVID was that it wasn't just a disruptor. It was an incredible accelerator of innovation and thinking. And one of the things that we don't want to do on this seminar, during this series of seminars, is to avoid, to miss that learning, right? So we want to capture that learning. And one of the key ways we're going to be doing that is in this webinar today. So without further ado, let me pass you to Graham. Graham works with Tomorrow Today, based in South Africa. I've had the great fortune of working with him on many occasions in the past, in the region and outside, in different guises. Graham is, for me, Graham is a thought provocateur. He doesn't necessarily have the answers, but he pushes you to get the answers. To get you to think strategically, to think tactically, and really that's his key role, is to help organizations, executives, managers think about how they're going to implement their strategies in these changing times. We're also joined by Ahmed from Coded, as Rana said. Ahmed is going to be helping us, have a debate, a conversation around what's been going on in the region, but also based on his experience, in terms of setting up a business and getting people on board and how to engage his employers, particularly with that theme in mind, the future of work and hybrid teams. So without further ado, over to you, Graham.
Hi, Graham. Graham, I think you're on mute because we can't hear you.
No, from my side, I'm not on mute.
Perfect. Now you're good.
Okay, I didn't do anything. Okay, can you hear me though?
If you could start at the beginning, Graham.
Okay, for those who acknowledge first, seeing as that let us down, I'm not sharing any slides. Now somebody is saying I'm muted again. Can I just make sure that everything's working from my side? I haven't touched anything. I'm not doing anything. Can you hear me, Rahul? Okay. Okay. I see a thumbs up.
We can hear you. We can hear you now.
Okay, cool. Somebody else is saying there's too much static. Please just interrupt me, Rahul, if you're not hearing me or if there's any issues on my side. Okay, well, anyway, let's start again for those of you who are struggling on your side. As Rahul said, we're going to be talking today about the future of work and especially thinking about hybrid teams, but we're going to start by thinking about the forces that are shaping the future of work over the next few years and what we can expect to see globally and in the region as well. I am not sharing slides. I have got my slides behind me. I use a green screen studio. So if you are not seeing me full screen, you might want to just roll over my name and click on the 3 dots next to my name and then say pin to frame or spotlight, and maybe also the organizers can spotlight my screen. That will probably help as well. Just make sure that you can see me nice and big. We are going to have interaction as we go along. The Q&A box is already open, So if you do have questions as we go along, use the Q&A box. I'm also seeing the chat box, as you can see. I've got multiple screens in my studio. So if you do have a comment to make, you can also pop that in the chat box. But it'll help us if you have a specific question you'd like us to answer. If you put that in the chat box as well, then we'll be able to see those questions specifically. I'm also going to be using a technology today called AHA Slides to just help us get a little bit more interactive. This is the downside of being in this digital world, is we don't see each other's faces. And there's a little bit of a mute and static problem every now and again. Hopefully that's sorted out. The upside is we can actually be more interactive if we use digital tools. So won't you grab your phones, point your camera at this QR code, and answer the question. Which city are you logging in from today, or which part of Kuwait City, if you're just in Kuwait at the moment, which suburb or which part of the city are you logging in from? If the QR code isn't working for you, then please just go to ahaslides.com/NLI, and you'll be able to log in and give us your details. Let me show you why I'm doing this. Please keep this open once you've done it. This is just to make sure that we can all get into it. We'll be asking some questions and getting your interaction as we go along. But have a look, here we go. So obviously, most people are from Kuwait, but there's somebody there from Dubai. And then we've got people dialing in a few places. So please just make sure that you can access that page and then keep it open for me, so that when we come back a little bit later and ask you some questions related to our content, that you've got that open and interacting for us. Excellent. Thank you very much. So I'm sure you know that our theme today is the future of work, and in particular, the concept of the hybrid future. But before we get to hybrid, I think that it is a problem that a lot of companies have got, that they are jumping to asking the question, when should we go back to work? How many people should go back to work? How many days a week should we go back to work? And as Rahul said in his introduction, if we're jumping to those questions, if we think that those are the most important questions about the future of work, I think we might be missing some of the learnings that can come out of the crisis, out of the disruption that we've experienced for the last 2 years. It was a number of years ago, back specifically in 2015, that I was speaking at the London School of Economics. Bill Gates was the opening speaker at the conference. I ran a workshop later in the afternoon. I sometimes think that I should say I shared the stage with Bill Gates because I was in his session in the morning. I don't think he stayed for my session in the afternoon, but it was the same stage on the same day. Anyway, Bill was talking about the future. He was talking about the 2020s and the world that we are in now. Interestingly enough, by the way, he did talk about back in 2015, he did say that there are a number of forces that could dramatically change the world. One of them could be a global pandemic that causes quarantine. So those people who say, we didn't see a global pandemic coming, we didn't see COVID coming. Not that Bill Gates predicted COVID, but he certainly, along with many other people, was aware of the possibility. And that's part of what we have to do, always be aware of the possibilities of disruption. But that wasn't his focus on the day, and it's not my focus now. What he was saying is that the 2020s, this era that we are now living in, was going to be an era of unprecedented change, that we were going to see remarkable amounts of change. And here's the reason. He said that we spent 30 years creating technologies that can instrument the world. What he meant by that is we had created computer and digital technologies that allowed us to reduce the size and the cost of technology, that we could build the Internet of Things. That was still the cliche label that we were using 7 years ago. I don't think we use it much now, but it's a good label. The Internet of Things means that every device in our world can become smart, because we can put technology into the device and we can get data from that device. Then he said, we've spent the 1990s and 2000s interconnecting all of those instrumented devices. And of course, that's the internet, and 5G and Wi-Fi, and now, getting more and more interconnected. And once you do that, intelligence begins to emerge from the system. So when we talk about smart homes and smart offices and smart cities, and I know that that is something that Kuwait is definitely talking about, the concept of a smart city, the concept of everything in the city being instrumented. I know one of the thoughts going into the near future is the thought of driverless cars and more use of drones and robots for deliveries of products and services. And this is beginning to happen, and it's already being experimented in. And in fact, the whole of the Middle East, Dubai in particular, I spent last week at Expo 2020, and there's a massive vision of what the technology instrumented and interconnected future can look like. And then that intelligence begins to emerge. And when that happens, and this was the point of what Bill Gates was saying, when that intelligence begins to emerge, systems begin to change. And we haven't yet seen what happens when systems change. When systems begin to change, it will impact every single industry, every single sector of society, and every country in the world. A simple example is when cars go driverless, not just a few cars here or there, but when driverless cars are compulsory, think about what happens then. So again, we know that cars can be driverless. That technology has been proven already, but only when all of the cars are driverless and there's an interconnected system of driverless cars, then intelligence can emerge in the system. What does that mean? Well, that means every car, every bus, every truck, every taxi can talk to every other vehicle on the road. And between them, they can come up with the perfect traffic pattern just for now. And that means that we can increase traffic efficiency and increase traffic safety by unbelievable amounts. No more accidents, no more traffic problems, because the cars will sort out the traffic system for themselves. Every single industry, every single sector, every single country in the world is going to be impacted. And I believe it's going to happen in the next few years. I actually think that COVID has accelerated some of that change. Now, maybe a way to think about this, and here's where I want to get you involved. Maybe the way to think about it is to imagine the changes that might happen in what we could call the rules for success and failure. Now, when I say the rules for success and failure, I don't just mean the legal rules. I don't just mean the legislation or the regulations in your industry. What I'm really talking about, and the reason I've put rules in inverted commas, is I'm talking about the way in which your industry operates. I'm talking about the norms, the standards, the benchmark best practices, just the way things are done in your industry. I wonder if, as a smart world begins to emerge, as a world that is instrumented, interconnected, and then intelligent begins to emerge. I wonder what some of those changes in rules might be in your industry. So won't you go back to AHA slides again? If you logged in, it might now say to you, you just need to refresh the screen so that you can get to a place where you can type in some of your thoughts and some examples from your industry and from Kuwait. I'm not an expert on your industry and I don't live in Kuwait. So I'd love to know what you are seeing in your part of the world. What's changing and you think it might change forever? COVID has accelerated some of those changes. The work from home hybrid workplace is one of those examples. But what else can you see? Let me give you a few examples while you're thinking, and please type while I'm talking now. If you've got an idea, type it in. I can see your responses and I'll respond immediately. But let me give you a few examples. I think supply chains are going to be hugely disrupted. Of course, the war in Ukraine with Russia is just adding to that disruption now, but I think a lot of companies and countries are going to think, how can we regionalize? We've been globalizing for the last 20 years. Now I think it's going to be global and regional that's going to be important. I think that geography is nearly dead. What do I mean by that? I think that people working from home for the last 2 years, many of them have realized I don't actually have to go to the office. I might want to go to the office. It might be nice to go back to the office, but I don't have to go back to the office. And that means I don't have to live in the same city as my job. I don't have to live in the same country as my job. Do you know what? I don't even have to live in the same time zone as my job. And employers have already begun to think about this. So employers are already starting to look all over the world for their next recruitment. They're not just limiting themselves to the city that their company is in. They're looking globally, and I think we are starting a massive war for talent globally. Now, the question, of course, is how does this impact Kuwait? Well, it impacts you in a number of ways. If you're a business that could employ people from all over the world, suddenly you've got a much bigger talent pool available to you. It also means that a lot of your employees are not just feeling that they are competing for jobs in Kuwait, but maybe they are competing for jobs all over the world. It changes the job market quite a lot. And this is why I'm starting with this thought, because we can't have a conversation about hybrid working and the future of work without having conversations about all the shifts and changes that are taking place. If you've been to the previous workshops in the series, you've already had a workshop on future trends. And some of these trends were talked about, including, for example, what if the future of the office is no office at all? What about virtual reality and augmented reality and extended reality? I'm pushing us into the future a little bit further. This is maybe not a reality in the next year or two, but I think it will be a reality by the end of this decade. It will fundamentally change the world of work. Maybe another way to think about this that will help you. And thank you. A lot of you are putting some really great ideas. We'll come and have a look at your ideas in AHA slides in a minute. But some of you are already touching on something I wanted to talk about. I really do think that COVID has changed people's expectations. And I think that things that might have happened over the course of this next decade have actually been accelerated to happen in just 2 years of lockdown. So, for example, people want more flexibility. They want flexibility of working from home sometimes, then coming into the office sometimes. They want more flexibility around working hours and working conditions. Just generally want more flexibility. I'm seeing that people want a workplace that doesn't count the number of hours that they work, but is shifting towards measuring their outputs and their deliverables and not really measuring their hours. This is a huge issue for some of the professional organizations. I started life as a chartered accountant at KPMG, and lawyers, accountants, auditors, actuaries, engineers, many of the professionals charge by the hour. I don't think you're going to be able to charge billable hours by the end of this decade. I think that we are going to be working in an environment where people won't pay you for the number of hours that you work. They'll only pay you for the work that you do. This is impacting every industry, though, not just professional services, not just those industries that it's easy to work from home. One of my clients here in South Africa, where I'm based, is a forestry company. And this story goes back a number of years, long before COVID. But it's an illustration of an outputs-based mindset and how it can impact every industry. The work crews that worked in the forests, that had to cut down trees, they were conflicting. They were actually threatening to go on strike against the management because they felt that they kept on being pushed to work overtime. They kept on being pushed to work more hours than they wanted to work. Management felt that they weren't working hard enough. Management felt that they weren't being productive. And there was this massive tension between the laborers and management. A consultant came in and said, well, why don't we change the way that we measure things? Why don't we move to an outputs-driven measurement? So instead of just saying the workers have to work for 8 hours, and then at the end of the 8 hours, then complaining that they haven't done enough work, why don't we tell the workers how many trees they have to cut down? And when they finished cutting down that number of trees, their shift is over. So they're not employed for 8 hours a day. They are employed to cut down, I don't know, 1,000 trees as a group in the day. And if they cut down 1,000 trees, they can be finished. Or if they've still got a few more hours to work, they can cut more trees down and then they can be paid more. Do you see the shift in mindset? It's a shift from paying them by the hour to paying them for the work they actually do. Well, it had a remarkable impact on this business. The workers realized that if they worked faster, they could go home earlier. And they discovered that they could actually cut down the number of trees that was expected, let's say 1,000 trees in a day. They could actually do it in about 6 hours. And some of the work crews decided, we'll take the extra hours off. Some of the work crews decided, we'll work the extra 2 hours and make more money. Everybody was happy. Management got the output they were looking for, sometimes more output than they expected, which was great. The workers were happy. It's an outputs-driven workplace. I wonder what that might mean in your workplace. In some environments, it goes even further than this to distributed decision-making or self-organizing teams, where you say to people, here's the work that has to be done, and we're not going to tell you how to get it done. You have to organize yourselves. Now, this is leading into the computer age, where some of what we do is going to be able to be automated. And using data and predictive analytics, we are going to be able to understand a lot more about what makes people productive, what makes people happy, what type of workplaces really work well. And that's going to allow us to do something that I think is a huge request from people in the world at the moment, and that is to personalize more for me. We often think of this only from a client perspective, that we need to personalize the client or the customer experience. But I think this applies to the future of work as well, that workers, employees, colleagues are saying, let's change the working environment. Don't just tell me to come in, work 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, at my desk, you know, the way it used to be before lockdown. But how do we change the world of work? How do we change the way that we engage in creating a workplace that people want to work in? Now, you've given me lots of great examples, and I'm going to look at those in a few minutes, but please keep adding. If I've sparked some thoughts for you, please keep adding some examples while we're talking. But as you heard at the beginning, it's not just me who's talking in the session, but we've got somebody from Kuwait who's building a business and who can speak not just from his own experience, but also from the experience of the region. And so, Ahmed, I'm going to pass over to you to say, well, what have you found in the system? And maybe, Rahul, you want to give Ahmed just a little bit more of an introduction than I'm giving him there so that people can locate him. But I think we're going to hear from Ahmed's story that the world has changed, and it's changed in your part of the world already. I'm not really predicting the future because there are already businesses in the region doing some of the things I'm talking about.
There's that famous phrase, isn't there, that the future is here, it's just not distributed equally. Something along those lines. You can just step back a little bit and just give us a little bit of your journey, just literally a 2-minute plotted history of why you even went into where, how you got to where you are now.
Wonderful. Thank you, Rahul. Thank you, Graham. So first of all, my name is Ahmed Marafi. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Coded. My story started in 2012. As soon as I got back from the States, that's when I graduated with a bachelor's of computer engineering. I did not want to get a normal job, right? The majority of jobs in Kuwait, especially the governmental jobs, are just, typical normal jobs where you go to work for 8 to 10 hours a day, work 5 days a week, and barely accomplish much, unfortunately, due to bureaucracy and a lot of other issues within the government body, right? And if you want to work with private entities, I did not, at the time, I couldn't identify a company that I wanted to kind of work for, where I would be able to kind of share my skill sets and kind of accomplish something big and work as part of some sort of big vision, right? So at that time, I've decided to take a couple of paths. The first path was the normal career path, and that's when I started, applying to different jobs. I worked with Schlumberger, the oil company, basically the top oil services company in the world. And they hired me as an engineer, trained me to be a wireline field engineer. They sent me to school in Abu Dhabi for about 3 months, taught me the fundamentals of logging and perforation and everything that is related to kind of oil services in a very short period of time, right? And at the same time, I took a second path, which is the startup path, right? I wanted to see if I have the skill sets and the ability to build something on my own, right? So while I was doing that, I was working on a small startup, an e-commerce startup that allows different small businesses in Kuwait and the region to sell their products online. So that was the startup path. And at the same time, I was going through the career path. I then, like on the career path side, I then switched jobs and I joined Zain, our sponsors. Beautiful company, right? It's a telecom company in Kuwait, and I joined them in marketing, right? Marketing communication. I was kind of acting as a bridge between IT and marketing, and that's when I saw that the culture of Zain is set up in a way where there's a lot of innovation, there's a lot of creativity. They have, I don't know how they do it, but they have an amazing way of attracting the best talent in Kuwait, right? So I've learned quite a lot from that. And then I switched to Kuwait Oil Company and worked with them for a few years. And at the same time, on the startup path, I started with that e-commerce startup. It didn't work, it failed. So I started something else. I kind of pivoted, built something else. It was more of a mobile application that kind of does the same idea. That didn't work as well. And then I kind of stopped. thought about my whole journey on the career path and the startup path. And that's when I realized that the main problem that I kind of faced with the startup path is that I did not have the necessary skill sets to build the right kind of technical product, right? And that's a problem that a lot of people are facing in Kuwait and this region. I've seen so many people wanting to start apps and websites. And the first thing they do, because they lack the technical skills, is that they go and hire a third-party company to build their solutions, right? So they would go with that path, spend a lot of money and efforts, and wait for a very long period of time. And then after 9 to 12 months, they receive the first initial version of their solution, whether it's an app or a website, and they find out that it's probably not as functional and not built the right way, or not built in a way where it kind of matches what they had in their head, right? So that's when I realized that I need to learn coding the right way. Even though I've actually studied coding back in school in the States, the programming languages that I've learned were kind of outdated. They're not really related to the programming languages that are being used right now and these days by the biggest tech players in the world, such as Google, Netflix, Amazon, you name it, right? So that's when we realized, my co-founder and I, we took a step back and we thought, hey, why don't we start a coding school in Kuwait? Why don't we teach people about the future today? You know, coding at the time was pretty mature enough in the States, but in Kuwait, we were kind of pretty behind compared to Europe and the States. So we started Coded as the first coding academy in the Middle East, wanting to cultivate the next generation of coders in MENA. We wanted to teach people how to code so that they become producers instead of consumers, instead of relying on third-party companies, instead of relying on freelancers. They can actually work on the product on their own, right? They can actually build that product, whether it's an app, whether a website. If they don't actually want to do that, they can actually hire people and manage that team, right? Knowing and speaking the same language that they speak, right? If they hire a bunch of developers, they can at least understand what developers want, and at the same time, they can understand the customer and bridge that gap. They would act as a bridge between the customer and the developer. That way, they would have a much higher chance to build something that is successful, right? So that's where Coded started, and that was back in 2015. At that time, Coded was set up in a way where we're kind of building something pretty new for this region and something pretty new for Kuwait. And in order for us to make sure that we have something sustainable and scalable, we wanted to start by hiring the right kind of talent and having the best culture, the best environment that you can ever find in Kuwait, so that we make sure that when we hire the right kind of talent, we keep on retaining them. We keep on upskilling them and giving them everything they would need to kind of implement all the ideas they have on mind. And that's exactly what we did. I was inspired by my journey with Schlumberger, in which, you know, my background is computer engineering, but I was able to learn everything about the oil field in a very short period of time. That kind of inspired me to set up the curricula in a way where anyone can actually learn how to code in a very short period of time. I was inspired also by Zain and the culture at Zain, and I've built that into the culture of Coded, wanting to kind of give the students and the employees and the team members the best kind of experience they can ever have, and have them feel like they're part of this team. They're actually working to accomplish a big goal. And that's how things have been going since then. You know, we've been hiring the best talent. We have an amazing talent density, and we're retaining this talent. And we got to where we got to today. We've graduated more than, I would say, 600 full stack developers. Each developer can actually code in more than 6 and 7 programming languages and frameworks, and they're now accomplishing a lot of amazing things. So this is where Coded stands.
Ahmed, can I ask you then, because I'm sure that you weren't able to achieve that success. I mean, that's remarkable. 600 programmers coming through in the last 6 or 7 years. What would you say are some of the rules that you changed for your business? So, and to phrase that slightly differently, what are some of the things you have done differently in your business that's allowed you to attract some of the talent, move them so quickly through your system, and build a business that's maybe very different from other businesses in the region? What do you think you've done differently?
Wonderful question, Graham. So I started by trying to challenge the status quo, right? We set up Coded in a different way than any other company. So we did not force the employees to come in for 8 hours to 10 hours a day. They can work from anywhere. They can work from home, from a cafe, anywhere where they would feel comfortable.
Just to be clear for people listening, this is before COVID, right? So
exactly. That was back in
before
2015.
lockdown, before you were forced to do that. This was your choice before then, right?
Exactly. So we actually set up the first coding bootcamp in a co-working space, right? We did not want to set it up in a normal kind of brick and mortar classroom, just to give the students and the instructors the feel that, you know, they're doing something differently. They're kind of running this program in a different kind of environment. So we did not really enforce a lot of rules. We kept it flexible. We gave a lot of autonomy and kind of open. We created a very open culture and gave the instructors and the trainers and the students a lot of flexibility and autonomy so that they can do whatever they want. We didn't really put a lot of rules in terms of what time you would come in, what time you would have to leave. Okay, so basically for the trainers, they actually have to be in the classroom at the time when the class starts, and they leave afterwards when the class ends. But like during the weekends, during the working days, they can, if they didn't really have a classroom, they can work anywhere, right? We gave them communication tools to interact with each other without having to actually come into the office to meet with some people. From the get-go, from the start in 2015, we did not enforce them to attend the meetings in person. You know, they could have attended them. They can actually attend the meetings on the internet using Zoom or Google Meet, whatever it is, right? So that was the kind of mindset that we had at the time, pre-COVID.
Sorry to interrupt. If you don't mind me asking, and I'm going to try to be careful how I ask this. My experience of working, I've worked with a number of companies in Kuwait, and my experience, and it's a cultural thing, so there's no right or wrong here, but my experience is that Kuwaitis tend, from what I can see, to prefer more structure, to prefer more rigid ways of working. That may simply be the experience I've had with the companies I've worked with. It might not be something that's cultural. But how did you experience that? Lockdown has taught us that we can do this. Lockdown has taught us that we can be flexible. But before lockdown, I'm sure there were lots of people who thought you were a little bit crazy, who thought that this wouldn't work.
Exactly.
What was your experience of that from a cultural perspective?
So if I link this to the kind of experience that I had before building Coded, this is exactly what I had to go through. I was an employee at Schlumberger, I was an employee at Zain, and I was an employee at Kuwait Oil Company, right? I've worked with 3 different companies, and that structure was there. I didn't like it as much because it was kind of limiting what I can do, right? I was trying to be as innovative and as creative as possible. I was trying to think out of the box, but I felt like this structure was kind of restricting me from thinking differently, right? So this is exactly what I kind of did the opposite of that and implemented the opposite of that at Coded, just to make sure that like I have the best kind of culture, the best kind of environment to allow the team members to be as innovative, as creative as possible, and only focus on the output. So I did not really enforce them to come to the office at a specific time. I did not enforce them to kind of work from a specific place or like kind of micromanage them, right? I gave them a lot of autonomy, a lot of flexibility, but at the same time, Graham, I had to make sure that I get the right kind of people to join the team. Not anyone would have the ability to fit in. Right? Some people are just used to too much structure. If you put them in such environment, you would see them losing track, not being able to generate a lot of good output. So it depends on the kind of individuals that join the company. And that's what I focus on most, just to make sure that whoever joins the company can fit into this culture and be onboarded in a very short period of time. instead of having to kind of mentor that person for a long period of time. And then if that person is used to a lot of structure and being in the office to actually accomplish work, then it will be very difficult for me to kind of challenge that sort of behavior and get him to be on the other side.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Dia has put a question into the Q&A box saying, asking about this sort of outcomes-based approach, and just asking, how difficult is it to do? Because it feels as if it will be more complex with your HR systems that maybe are not set up for it, that it might be more complex to manage people because some people will work longer hours, some people will work less. It's more difficult to manage a project if people are more flexible in this way. Dear, the answer is yes, it is more complex, it is more difficult, but if you find the right people, and if you can get the system working, you get more out of them. Ahmed, I don't know if you want to add to my answer there, because it sounds as if you've realized there are certain types of people that will be more successful in the type of system you've set up, and some people who won't. And I think that's a fair comment. It's not for everybody, is it?
Exactly. This is something I'm going to be talking about in more detail at another point when you kind of cover that, Graham. But what I want to say here is that it kind of depends on the people you're working with, right? If you're working with a lot of, like in my case, I work with a lot of developers, right? A lot of programmers, and programmers don't like a lot of restrictions, right? So that way you're going to probably limit their creativity. So what I do is that I use some tools that would allow me to see the output they generate on a daily basis without having to interact much with them, right? So there is some sort of communication channels that we use to kind of talk about the challenges, the problems they're facing. But at the same time, we use a tool, for instance, that's called GitHub, right? Where end of the day, they would push their code, I would review their code and see exactly what they did. And that's how I can tell whether that person is actually accomplishing and doing the actual work or not, without having to kind of bug that person or micromanage or kind of ask a lot of questions every few hours, right? So basically you have to trust your people. You seriously have to trust your people. You have to hire the best people you ever find and give them full trust and make and believe that they're actually accomplishing the work that they have to do.
Perfect. And we're going to come back to some of those thoughts a little bit later with some practical ideas of how to do that. So let's have a look quickly at what you've been saying. Thank you for everybody who's commented in the AHA slides here. And I think that a few of the comments that you've made, you made these comments before Ahmed and I were talking with each other, but I think some of them really echo what we were talking about, that we're going to have to change culture. We're going to have to use technology better than we've used it before. We're going to need leaders to change the skill set that they've got, because as much as the leadership skill set includes being technologically savvy, it also includes a lot more, I agree, emotional intelligence and different approaches to leadership in a technology driven and an automated driven world. So I think that we're all seeing the same thing. I think that we're seeing that the future of work requires us to rethink everything from a national and global perspective down to industry perspectives and all the way down to the culture of our businesses. So if that's the case, then what are some of the practical things that leaders need to do? Before, again, we talk about hybrid teams, and we're going to spend the second half of our time together focusing in on the issue of hybrid teams and what that means. But again, if we just jump to asking the question, how many hours should people work at the office? How many days should they come in? What does a hybrid team look like? We will have missed something that's happening in the world, a shift in culture, a shift in the way that we need to think about work. And I think the biggest shift is a shift towards adaptability. It's probably summed up best in this quote. This is one of my favorite quotes in the world by the CEO of Atom, which is in the financial services sector and in the fintech space. And Mark Mullen says this: the future is uncertain. We can't predict the future. I wish we could. In the introduction that Rahul gave me, he said, you know, Graham doesn't necessarily come with all the answers, but he does come with good questions. Rahul, if I had the answers, I promise I would give them to you. I would charge you a lot more. I would charge you a lot more. But my job is to bring the questions, right? Because I don't think anybody's got the answers. I don't think anybody can claim to predict the future. So if we can't predict the future, then what must we do? We must prepare for whatever might happen. And to prepare for whatever might happen, to go back to Mark Mullen's quote, it's more important to engineer adaptability into your system. So before we talk about hybrid teams and a model for hybrid teams, which is the main takeaway we want to give you in this session, I wanted to just give you 5 things that I think leaders need to do. 5 things that will set you up to be adaptable. And these 5 things are 5 leadership actions that will help you to build a healthy hybrid team. Then we'll talk about what you need to do to build the team. So the leadership actions first. The 5 leadership actions are the following. The first is you need to spend more time on the balcony. Now, that's a strange thing. If you're taking notes, you might have paused and said, what? That doesn't feel like a piece of business advice. Now, let me explain. The picture here is useful. There's a dance floor. People are dancing. And your job is the dance. Okay, so in my picture, my metaphor, your job is the dance. There's a job that has to be done. There's a dance that must be danced. You must do that. But if all you do is just do your job and focus in on the work that has to be done, and you never take time to walk off of the dance floor, walk up the steps and get onto the balcony, you won't ever see the big picture. If you'd prefer to use business language, let me say this: you need to do more strategic thinking. Too many people are running at very short timescales at the moment. COVID has made that even worse than ever before. People planning things just a week or 2 in advance. Very little long-term thinking, another piece of business language. But more importantly than just strategic thinking or long-term thinking, there are 2 other things that will really help you step up. Whether you're an entrepreneur building your own business, or whether you're in a business building your career. 2 things that will help you stand out from the crowd. And both of them need this bigger picture perspective. The first is that you look beyond just your job. If you're working for a company, you look beyond your department and your team. You don't look at the work that you've got to do, and when you've finished your work, you step back and say, right, my job is done, I'm good. You actually look at, well, who else is impacted by the work that I do? Who do I rely on? Who relies on me? How can I help them to do a better job? This is how you get promoted to management, by the way, because managers, the more senior you are, the higher your balcony is. In other words, the further you need to be thinking. I'm sure Ahmed will talk about the fact that he's got to think about not just what the people that are in his business are doing, but he's got to be thinking about how will they impact his clients. And not only just what is the service that they are providing to their clients, but what do their clients do with what they buy from Coded. You've got to be thinking about the whole system that you're in. So that's one of the reasons to take a bigger picture perspective. The second is maybe even more important, and that is to take time for reflection, to take time to pause and to think about what you are doing. This flows to the second thing, which is to ask better questions. So while you're on the balcony, the second leadership action that you can take is to ask better questions. Too many people ask questions that are mainly focused at working out, am I doing the things I'm supposed to be doing? Am I doing them right? So their questions are, what has to be done? When must it be done by? Who has to do it? How must it be done? These are clarifying questions. Not enough people ask curiosity-led questions. Now, if you're concentrating, you should be able to guess what my next slide is. I hope you can, because curiosity-led questions are questions which don't ask, how do we do this thing right? They ask, are we doing the right things? So they're not just asking what has to be done, when must it be done by, who must do it. They're also asking, why must it be done? Not in an arrogant way, not in a way of sitting back and saying, well, why should I do that? I mean, that's a nice way to hand in your resignation. If you keep asking that type of question to your boss, why, every time your boss says something to you, that's not the attitude I'm talking about. But the attitude is a curiosity-led attitude that pulls back a little bit, goes onto the balcony, if you like, and says, is this really the best way to do it? Is this really how it should be done? Now, I'm going to ask you a question, and here I have to tell you, all of your answers here are entirely anonymous. So we're not linking your name at all to the question. So please put in, even if they're tough questions that might cause a bit of a stir in your company if you were to ask them out loud. But let me ask you this, what questions should you and your team and your business be asking right now, but you're not? What questions should you be asking, but nobody in your business is really asking them? Hopefully, we've led your brain down a path in the last hour, a path of thinking about the future of work, thinking about what needs to change, thinking about what we might have to see differently. And you can give me some answers to those questions. Again, I'll give you a few minutes while I keep talking, and we'll come back to your answers in a minute. The third thing that you need to do is you need to embrace difference as a leader. You know, it doesn't help if you get up on the balcony and you think about your business and you ask good questions, but you always go and ask the same people. You ask the same group of people to give you answers. You will get the same answers every time. When I talk about embracing difference, I'm not just talking about the normal levels of diversity. We often just think of culture and gender. There's so many different ways in which we have differences from other people. Personality profiles, for example. Some people are introverts. I'm an introvert. I'm an off-the-chart introvert. I'd much rather spend time with myself than any other person in the world. That's not just because I'm a narcissist and I love myself too much, but I get my energy from being alone. And so for me, lockdown was very easy. My wife, however, is an extrovert. Lockdown's been really tough for her because she gets her energy from being with other people. The only other person she was able to be with during lockdown was me, and I was trying to be alone. So it wasn't the best situation for me or for her. And that's a little picture of your workplace. Some of you are extroverts and you can't imagine that people will want to continue working from home forever. You, at the earliest possible opportunity, you want to be back in the office. But not everybody's the same, right? Not everybody sees the world in the same way. And we need to embrace those differences, because differences are the basis of innovation. Differences are the basis of creativity. Differences are the basis of resilience. Differences power our organizations. Now, for some of you, that means that the fourth thing should make simple sense. We've got to unlearn some of what we learn. Dia, thank you very much. Introverts rock. introverts will rule the world on our own, quietly. But the fourth thing that we have to do is unlearn. Adam Grant is one of my favorite authors, and he's written what I think is one of the best books written in the last few years. Highly recommended to you in terms of thinking again. And here's a remarkable quote. It takes curiosity to learn. And I've said that the second thing you have to do is ask better questions and be more curious. So absolutely be curious, but it takes courage to admit that you're wrong, to admit that when you ask a question, you realize the answer coming back is unexpected and doesn't match what you saw of the world. Learning requires humility to admit what you don't know today, but unlearning requires integrity to admit that yesterday's logic no longer applies. That's quite something, because it means your experience, your education, your expertise is not quite as valuable as you thought it was. This last one is my favorite. Learning is how you evolve. Unlearning is how you keep up as the world evolves around you. So learning and unlearning is a critical skill. And all of that leads to the fifth point, which is that we are going to have to experiment more. But I'm going to come back to that fifth point right at the end and remind you of that and tell you a little bit more about what that means. So, if the world of work is changing more than we can imagine, that was my first point. The second point I'm making is that one of the most important things for you to do as a leader, whether you're the leader of a small team or you're an entrepreneur starting your own business, one of the key things you have to do is build adaptability into your DNA. And we could probably do a whole day's workshop on adaptability. But given the time I've got, I think this is a good enough start for you to take more time to reflect on what you're doing, asking better questions and looking in different places for the answers, being prepared to unlearn what you've learned before, and then experiment more. Now, we're going to come back to the concept of experimenting later, but Ahmed, if I can bring you in now, I'm pretty certain that some of these ideas guided you and your partner and your leadership team as you got Coded going. And what I'm going to do is ask you to reflect on that. And then, by the way, we're going to open for a short period of Q&A right now. So if you've got some questions you'd like to ask us already, you're welcome to throw them in, especially questions around how to be more adaptable. We'd be happy to take those questions now. And then the second half of our time together is going to focus on how do we apply these to specifically hybrid teams. But Ahmed, if I can bring you in and just no specific question, but do these things that I'm talking about here, do they make sense to you? Do they maybe give words to some of the journey you've been on for the last few years?
They definitely do. So Graham, since we started Coded, we've always wanted, just like any other business, when you build a fresh business, when you build a new business, you always think about the next step, right? Wanting to scale things up, wanting to expand the business. If you're running it locally, you would probably want to go regional and international. That was kind of part of our plan from the get-go. We were running a lot of boot camps in Kuwait, but we always wanted to kind of experiment running a boot camp outside of Kuwait regionally. Back in 2019, we were approached by an entity in Saudi asking us to run a white labeled boot camp in Saudi. And that was going to be the first ever boot camp to be delivered in Saudi. So, we were negotiating with them, we were talking to them, and then the deal went through, and we've decided to actually mobilize our team, move our team to Saudi Arabia for 3 months and a half, because the duration of the boot camp is 3 months and a half, right? It's a very intensive boot camp. And we were able to deliver the boot camp in a very amazing way, right? The output was great. We managed to train about 20 people. We got them all employed 3 days after the boot camp, and things were just perfect, right? As soon as we got back to Kuwait, we started to self-reflect. We started to kind of, we spent some time on the balcony, just like you said, right? And we thought, hey, if we ever wanted to run a similar experiment again, it will be very difficult for us to move the entire team to another country and run this bootcamp again, right? So we started to kind of think differently. We started to question ourselves and ask better questions, trying to kind of figure out a better way to be able to deliver the bootcamp without having to, move the entire team and handle a very big cost on shifting the resources to another country, having to kind of rent them hotel rooms and pay them per diem and that sort of thing. So that's when we kind of came up with the idea of wanting to deliver the boot camps virtually, right? So we started to run a lot of experiments. We started to explore a lot.
Ahmad, if I can just interrupt you here, because another Ahmad Dashti has asked in the Q&A, can you give us some examples of the things that leaders need to unlearn? This is probably the most obvious example. I'll give you a few more, Ahmad, in a little while. But the most obvious example is you have to be in the physical space to deliver your products and services, which 2.5 years ago, everybody in the world pretty much believed, I've got to be in the office. I've got to be in the space. If there's a boot camp in Saudi, we have to be in Saudi. And of course, this before COVID again, to give you your due, Ahmad,
exactly.
You learned this lesson. We don't have to be in the room, right? So there's a really good example.
Exactly, because like if you look at the different boot camps all around the world, this is exactly what they do. If they ever wanted to run a boot camp, it has to be a physical boot camp. So we were like, why do we really have to do that? Why? And at the same time, we did not really want to limit our expansion plans. We wanted to run a lot of pilot programs and see which country would be the best country to kind of deliver our boot camps right after Kuwait, right? We wanted to have that regional expansion without having the overhead. So we've decided to run a pilot program, and we chose Jordan as one of the countries we want to kind of run the first virtual bootcamp in. And that's when we kind of worked on the new setup, right? So we explored and kind of experimented with different communication tools. We've built an in-house tool that would help us deliver the content and kind of organize the curriculum in a better way to ensure that the output of the virtual bootcamp is very similar and even better than the physical bootcamp, which was the biggest challenge, right? How do you deliver a bootcamp through a remote team where the classes go for about 3.5 months and the bootcamp is super expensive, it's like extensive. It's about 4 hours a day for 5 days a week, and make sure that the output is very similar. If you look at the different research you would find online on online learning and on-demand learning, you would see that a lot of people lose interest after day 2 or 3. They drop off, they watch a bunch of videos, they start with a course, and then they lose interest because the setup is not really cohort based. You would feel as if you're learning alone. But thankfully, during back in December 2019, that's when we actually created that sort of setup for the first virtual bootcamp, and we delivered it, and it was just perfect, right? We were able to actually deliver the content and make sure that the students are learning. And we did a lot of surveys and got feedback from the students, knowing that we actually got them to the point where the kind of skill set they gained after the bootcamp is very similar to the skill sets that our students have gotten out of the in-person bootcamp. And during so in early February, that's when we started hearing about COVID, right? So the setup was complete in December, and in February, that's when we heard about COVID. And then all of a sudden, the Kuwaiti government announced the first case of COVID in Kuwait, and they started to talk about lockdowns and that sort of thing. At that moment, Graham, it was super easy for us to switch to a fully virtual setup because of that experiment, right? So it was a no-brainer to us, right? That when the government announced the lockdown, we within a couple of hours, we switched everything online. All of our boot camps went online. We were very resilient, right? So that adaptability was there, and we were able to make sure that the company moves on and kind of continues delivering its products without having to kind of take a couple of days or a month or whatever to kind of restructure things.
Lovely. Rahul, can I bring you in here? Because I know you look at the whole region and you do a lot of work across the region. Have you seen examples of adaptability over the last two years? Maybe in different sectors, different industries across the region, that might be of interest to the participants today, to just, and maybe also answering Ahmed Dashti's question about unlearning. That maybe there's been some great examples of unlearning in the last few years across the region. Rahul, I know you're battling with your Wi-Fi, so if you don't come in a few seconds, might be that you're buffering in a little bit.
No, I just continue. Just continue. My Wi-Fi is playing up. I'm just trying to rejig it.
Okay, no problem. I'll come back to you with that question a little bit later, because I know you've got some good answers. Ahmed, maybe I can throw it to you. You've given us some great examples of the work that you've done, but I know that your company touches many different companies and industries and sectors in the region. Do you have any good examples that jump to mind of adaptability that you've maybe seen over the last 2 years in the region that are interesting to point to?
I wouldn't say that I have a very specific example, but I would say that I've seen a lot of people wanting to build startups and small businesses. And the first thing they do is that they would end up hiring people and putting them into the same kind of culture and environment as the one they're used to, right? Where they force them to come to work for 8 hours a day or whatever. And then they discover that that kind of structure is limiting the output one way or another, right?
Yeah.
So this is actually one of the things that one of the mistakes that I did. Like, so even though I said, at the beginning of creating our boot camps and like hiring people and setting things up at Coded, we went with the approach of having a very open culture and a very open environment. I can actually mention an example here, Graham, is that like one day I felt like some employees were not really performing well. So I spoke with my co-founder and we both have decided to bring them in and kind of force them to work in the office, right? Thinking that bringing them to the office would help improve the output and make sure that we're actually meeting the different deadlines that we had. And unfortunately, that did not work. That went really bad in a way where everyone was kind of frustrated. All the team members were frustrated. The output took a big hit. And instead of being able to actually accomplish more, we started doing worse, right? So that's when we took a step back. We've kind of put our ego to the side and we've decided to go to the old setup, but have one-on-one sessions with the different team members, trying to understand what is the bottleneck, what is stopping them from accomplishing more, what is stopping them from going at the same pace they used to go with before, right? And we found out that there were some issues with the structure of the company that was kind of limiting their creativity, limiting their interaction with some other team members. As soon as we tackled these issues, and we managed to actually improve the outcome by quite a lot. We improved the processes in-house. We actually were able to meet the deadlines and actually, not that we only met the deadlines, but we got the projects completed way ahead of time.
I think that's a wonderful example of these 5 points that I've just made. You had to step back and reflect a little bit, ask better and different questions, realizing that different people work in different ways. You had to be prepared to acknowledge the way we thought it would work is not going to work. And we had to try a few things in order to see how we could do it better, experiment more. So that's why I wanted to put these 5 things. Ahmed, you've helped us to give a really practical example of these 5 steps. And these are how you as a leader go about making change, how you change culture. And so now we need to start thinking about how do we change to a healthy hybrid team environment. Rahul, do you want to come in? I think Rahul's still struggling with
No,
his
no,
Wi-Fi.
I'm back. So I
Oh,
was
you're
going
back, you're
to
back.
just,
Excellent. Go for it.
yeah, I would just for the 10 seconds my Wi-Fi is working. I think for me, the big thing about that, those 5 points is I see so many companies. So I was working with weeks ago, and one of the interesting things was they decided to go and explore this new world. Looking at IoT more, in a lot more detail.
Yeah, Rahul, I think you're
did
buffering. Yeah, sorry. I'm getting a lot of other people are coming in now to say that it's we one of the things we might have to unlearn is hotel Wi-Fi. Rahul, you're doing your best, I know, but I'll pick it up from here. You've all put in some lovely questions. I asked you this question a little bit earlier. I love the first question that came in, and I'm glad I told you that this was all anonymous, because somebody is sitting here today saying, why am I still at my current job? I need to get out of here and start my own business and become an entrepreneur. Well, please don't tell your employer that we were the ones who inspired you. Oh, there's somebody else has come in and said, when can I be my own boss? Please don't tell any of your employers, if they've paid for you to be on this course, please don't accuse us of getting you to, to leave your job. But you can be an entrepreneur in your job, of course. And you can bring some of these attitudes into your work environment, even if you're not the head of your own business, because these are attitudes that you can have. But some wonderful questions. Thank you. How can business be done completely differently? That question basically sums up my whole life. That's what I wake up every morning asking. And follow me on social media if you like, because almost every day I put up a question and insights that can provoke you in helping you think about the answer to that question. How can business be done differently? But all of this leads to exactly this point, right? How do we do teams and the workplace differently in the very next thing that's coming in the workplace? And Omar, your question leads us perfectly into the last piece of our workshop, which is about shifting the culture of our businesses to provide more flexibility. And I use the word hybrid here because I think hybrid is almost about maximum flexibility. It's about reaching an environment where it's not just saying to people, you have to come into the office 3 days a week and you can work from home 2 days a week. That's flexibility, but it's not maximum flexibility. We need to build an environment where people have got a lot more control, autonomy. Well, now I'm getting ahead of myself because I'm going to give you a model for healthy hybrid teams. And Omar, if we don't do this, your question is actually a point really worth making, because I think you know the answer to your question. Your question is, if we don't do this, are we at risk of losing our best talent? Because our best talent will say, I don't want to work the old ways. I would much rather go and find a job that allows me to work in a future of work kind of way. The answer is it's happening. It's happening already. It's happening all over the world. I don't think it's happening as much in Kuwait yet, but I think it's coming. And I think people like Ahmed with Coded and others are already pushing the boundaries in Kuwait and causing, especially a younger generation of Kuwaitis to say, there's another way to do this, isn't there? There's another way to engage with this. So here's what I'm going to do very, very quickly. Why don't we just take a quick 2-minute break? This is not, in fact, I now have the wrong thing here. You've probably got time to quickly run and get a cup of coffee, but this is not a coffee break, right? This is not 10 minutes. This is not even 5 minutes. This is just 2 minutes for you to just stretch a little bit, because we are about to talk about the 5 things you have to do to build a healthy hybrid team. But I think if you're like me, you probably could do with just a stand up, stretch and break. I'll see you in 2 minutes time. Okay, I wasn't joking about this just being a 2-minute break. It was just literally a stretch. I hope you're back in the room. Rana, if you can spotlight me again, that's great. Thank you very much. Just in case somebody's kettle hasn't boiled quickly enough and they're still getting back in the room, here's just a little bit of fun as we just get back into the room. This is a video that somebody sent me. I think it's put together by a company that produces collaboration software, but it's just a little bit of fun about what it feels like to get back to the office. I'm going to play a video now. Maybe just have your fingers close to the volume button. I think the video is at the same level as my voice, but if it's slightly loud or soft, sort it out on your side.
Returning to work. Chair. E-Man, great to see you, man. Is he going in for the shake? Or is it a hug? It's too soon to hug, right? Elbow bump? I'm in too deep now. I want a hug. We'll settle for a fist bump? Yeah, what a chest bump. What are we doing? Bring it in, bro. What am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to do? Good to see you, man. So yeah, this is fun. Yeah. Okay. Sure. Cool. Yeah. Returning to work.
Just a little bit of fun. Okay, we are back in the room, and now very quickly, I want to give you 5 ingredients for building a healthy hybrid team. And then please don't forget, the Q&A box is open. We're going to go to Q&A. We're going to bring Ahmed in a little while. He's going to tell us what he's done in this space, and we're going to try and be as interactive as possible. So keep your questions coming. But what we've discovered, and our team's been working in a hybrid environment for more than 15 years. Like Ahmed, we moved to this many, many years ago before COVID forced us to. And during COVID, we've now had the opportunity to sort of put a framework around some of the ways that we've worked and help our clients to work. If you want to build a healthy team, but a healthy team that has to be successful in a hybrid world of work, these 5 things are the most important ingredients. It's not a new competency model. It's not a new leadership framework. It's just 5 ingredients that you can add to your team. But if you get these ingredients wrong, if any of these ingredients are missing, your team isn't going to function. So the first of those ingredients is belonging. And this is the obvious place to start. People have to feel like they are connected to a team. And there are 2 real ingredients to getting belonging right. The first is personal connections. People feel connected when they feel that they know the other people and that they are related to, connected to, they have fun with other people. So what we have to do is we have to work out what can we do to build the personal connections between the members of our teams. Ideally, friendships. People work best in an environment where they enjoy working with others, and people enjoy working with people they like and trust and are friendly with. So what can you do? The danger is that we do nothing, that we just hope that somehow a connection will happen because we have meetings and we're working together. In a physical environment, when everybody's coming into the workplace, literally just being in the same workplace actually does this. You all arrive at roughly the same time in the morning, you get coffee together, you chat, maybe you talk about the football from last night, maybe you talk about the news, maybe you talk about the fact that you don't want to talk about the news at the moment because it's a little bit scary. You ask each other questions. You also look at each other. Somebody who might naturally walk into the office and is normally quite fun and joking, if they walk into the office looking quite serious, you realize something's different. You realize they don't have to even say anything. You realize something's different. And if somebody who is normally quite quiet and everything walks into the office and is very smiley and all the rest, you realize something's happened. Something good has happened. Now, you may or may not ask them, but you've made a connection, right? And you probably will discuss with them. So, oh, Graham, you're looking like you had a good day yesterday, and that gives them the opening, the opportunity to maybe give you some good news from their family or something. So how do we do that? In a hybrid work environment, I truly believe that we've got to actually have meetings where this is the purpose of the meeting. So once a week, I would suggest you've got to have a meeting, and it might just be a short meeting where everybody connects. And in those meetings, you should have your videos on. I don't think you always have to have your videos on. I think too many leaders switch your video on as a way of controlling you. So they want you to switch your video on in a meeting so that they can see you not answering emails or sitting playing on your phone, right? And that's not a really good management technique, by the way. That's very draining. People feel as if they're being spied on. I'm very comfortable if it's a business meeting, a task list meeting, a to-do list meeting. I'm very happy if people keep their videos off. I check whether they were concentrating by what questions they ask afterwards and whether they actually do the work. So videos is not a good management technique. But I think that at least once a week, we should have a meeting where we can see each other. And maybe somebody tells us a little bit of a story. Maybe we ask a question that unlocks some personal interest. in people. We do some team building activities. It might feel a little bit cheesy, and some people might not like doing it, but we need to build connections, however you build those connections. I've had clients who've done some wonderful things during lockdown, and I hope they continue to do them. One of the best things that I was involved in was a company that sent everybody in the team, sent them a box of ingredients, food, and sent it to their house, couriered to the house in the morning with instructions to say, log into Zoom at 1 o'clock and be in your kitchen. And then they had a celebrity chef come on and take those ingredients and take you through the process of making a masterpiece of a lunch using just those ingredients. But you did it with your colleagues. And we were all in Zoom and we all had our videos on, and I made a real mess of it and everybody laughed at me and it was lots of fun. And I eventually ended up having a peanut butter sandwich because I had so badly messed up my box of ingredients. And other people had the most magnificent lunch because they got it perfectly right. And we had lots of fun together, and it was a bit of effort. It was a bit of work, but what a connection was made. So belonging can be built by having personal connections, and we need to make time to do that. The second way that you build connection is having rituals, routines, and rhythms. Now, those are three different words that all mean the same thing. So I don't think they're three different things. It's basically one thing: rituals, routines, and rhythms. What is the rhythm of your week? What are some of the rituals that your team has? Every Monday, we do this. In the first week of the month, we do something else. During Ramadan, this is what we plan to do. So use routines, use rhythms of the calendar, of the week, of the business cycle. Use those to connect your team. So it's going to look different in different teams, but the question for you to ask is, what rituals do we have as a team? For some teams, it's as simple as saying, every Monday, let's wear the same color shirt. Or if you have a shirt that's got your logo on it, let's wear our company logo shirts on a Monday. It might not feel like much. That might feel like a silly thing to do, except when you switch on your videos and you see everybody else connected with the logo, with the same background, there's the sense of, I'm part of a team. I belong here. Belonging. The second part of our model is to build mastery. Once people feel they are connected, the second thing we have to ask is, does everybody feel confident and competent to contribute? A lot of C's there, sorry, but that's the right sentence. Confidence is, I feel that I can contribute, that I'm trusted, that my team wants my contribution, that I can contribute. Competence is, I've got the skill set. So you don't want confidence without the skill set. Those people are dangerous. And you don't want competence without people feeling comfortable or feeling as if they can contribute. So both of those have to happen. Now, again, this happens in the physical space. This sense of competence and confidence often happens in an informal setting where you give a little bit of feedback. Somebody does a good job. You're their manager. You walk past their desk and you say, well done, Graham. That was a good thing. Thank you. We are not doing that in the virtual world. We're not dropping that private note to somebody. Better than a private note is a personal note in public. Does that make sense to you, a personal note in public? If we just say in a public meeting, well done, Graham, that thing you did yesterday for that client, knocked it out the park, good job. It feels as if it's informal, just off the cuff, but if you do it in front of the whole team, it can have a wonderful effect. Now, one of the tools that you can use here is a shared document. Our team has a shared document online where if somebody else in the team does a really good job, you go into the shared document and you just write what they did, and you just say thank you. And every Friday, we get together and we have a look at that list of things all together. So it's a short meeting. It's a 10-minute meeting where we just go and read that document together. In the past week, this person has thanked that person. This person did a good job. That person says that person did a great job. In essence, what we're trying to do is those informal interactions that you might have at a tea break or during a lunch break. We're trying to just bring them into the digital world and make sure that they happen online. So now I'm suggesting there's a connection type meeting once a week, and then there's a feedback, a positive affirmations meeting during the week. Just by the way, you might want to help your team just be confident with virtual technology. Whether people are in the office or not, we're all going to have to get better at using our videos, of having decent lighting and good cameras. Rahul, I'm not having a go at you. I know you're doing your best in a hotel, but we've got to have decent Wi-Fi and all this. I mean, you know where I was going with that statement. You know, it's not your fault today. You're doing your best in a hotel and difficult circumstances. But if our colleagues are working from home and they don't have decent Wi-Fi, or they don't have a decent place to work, maybe because they're in a small house and they keep getting interrupted. As a leader, as a manager, you've got to take that seriously. That will reduce their confidence. It will reduce their competence to contribute and therefore reduce their mastery. So help them sort out their technology. The third part of my model is autonomy. Now, we've spoken quite a lot about autonomy already, so I won't say much about it, but autonomy is not just working from home. It's not just giving people the option to work from home. Autonomy is really about people feeling that they can work independently, that they do have agency. And there's a big word here. Ahmed's already used it. But if you're taking notes, make sure you write this one down in capital letters and underline it, that people feel you trust them. This is absolutely at the heart of our model. That's why you've kind of got two things leading up to it. People have got to feel they're connected to the team. They've got to feel that they are good at what they do. And then they've got to feel that you trust them to do it. Here's a question every manager, every team should be asking at the moment is, considering the work that has to be done today, the rest of this week, the rest of this month, considering what work we have to do as a team, under what conditions will we do our best work? The answer to this might be, we have to come into the office. There's a piece of work that's going to be best done if we're all in the office. And then you agree we'll come in on Thursday. But then we might agree that the rest of the week you don't have to be there. This, I think, is the most important question to ask in terms of a hybrid environment. And I don't think you ask it once. I think you ask it maybe once a week. Looking ahead at the week, under what conditions are we going to do our best work? Where do you need to work? How many hours do we need to be together? Can it be virtual? Does it have to be in the same space? And as you're asking that question, if you're a leader of a team, ask yourself, does my team know that I trust them? Do they feel trusted? And that is where autonomy comes from. It doesn't just mean anybody can do whatever they like and it's a free-for-all, but it's about trust. And then that trust leading to saying to people, okay, you do your best work, where and when your best work needs to be done. The fourth part of the puzzle is generosity. Now, generosity is not about giving. It's not about charity. It's about your contribution to the team. So it's about mentoring, for example. It's about saying, do other people need my help? You see, if we don't have generosity in our model, the danger is that people might just say, well, I'm good at what I do. Leave me alone to do my job. And then I'm not part of the team. I'm just this lone individual who might be good at what I'm doing, but generosity reminds us that we're part of a team, that we belong to a team. So if other people in our team need help, we give them help. We have empathy and care for others. And also that we don't work ourselves to burnout and a standstill. I think this is part of what Dubai's done with going to the 2.5-day weekend. Easy Fridays might be a way to talk about it. It's a case of saying, actually, people are overworked. COVID, we've had productivity during lockdown, but productivity is masking exhaustion. And Rahul, you saying in the chat box that generosity seems like the glue that holds it all together. I agree with you. If we're not generous, we're not a team. The final piece of the puzzle, and we've put it just off to the side visually in our model, is purpose. And by purpose, I don't mean the vision, mission, values of your business. I mean each individual's personal purpose. It's not about saying, how can you contribute to the company's purpose? It's about saying, how can the company help you achieve your life's purpose? How can we organize our work around our lives? This is not work-life balance. It's a step further than work-life balance. It's about saying, how can we live our best life? And that work is part of our best life. If we get that right, people's individual purpose in their lives, what makes their lives a good life to live, matches the company purpose. And in that way, we build a healthy hybrid team. Again, we could take a whole day to talk about these 5 areas, but hopefully that's enough for you to start thinking about how you might build a healthy hybrid team. There are no one-size-fits-all answers. So some of you might have been thinking, oh, Graham's going to tell me exactly how to run my team and how many hours they have to work at the office and how many days they have to come in. But it's going to be different in different environments, different for different industries, different for different functions in the business. And Aswati, I see your question and we'll come to it in a moment. But Ahmed, I know you also want to give us some practical ideas about some of the things you've done to implement these 5 areas in your business. So let me hand over to you to pick up the conversation about some of what you've done that might be practical ways to implement this healthy hybrid teams model.
Wonderful. Thank you, Graham. So first of all, thank you for kind of touching base and kind of explaining this framework, because this is exactly what we're trying to do at Coded, right? When we first started with, setting up the structure for Coded, again, we spoke about how we set up the culture from the get-go, but I wanted to make sure that I give people the flexibility of working anywhere while ensuring that there are enough communication channels implemented in place to make sure that everyone is involved at every single point of time, right? So for that, we started researching tools that we can use to actually make sure that we set up the proper communication channels. We found out that there are a couple of tools that we can use. One of them is called Discord, the other is called Slack. And Slack is actually being used by a lot of tech companies and startups to handle day-to-day work. So what we did is that we ended up using Slack and setting up different channels and different topics for discussions, right? Slack is very similar to WhatsApp. So it's as if you have a different group for different topics. So what we did is that we set up a channel that's called Weekly Objectives, where each and every single team member has to kind of write at the beginning of the week. You would go to that channel, we would kind of write bullet points about the kind of things you want to work on during that week, right? So every team member would write, hey, today I'm going to be, or this week I'm going to be working on this project, and I'm going to be making sure that I finish up and make sure that the following contract is signed and so on, right? And then we also created a different channel that we called the daily tasks channel, where each and every team member actually goes to that channel and kind of writes down the tasks and the things that he or she is working on during that day, right? Sometimes they also share, the things that they've worked on during the previous day, if they've actually accomplished more than what they were thinking they want to do during the previous day, right? We also made sure that, so my co-founder and I kind of split up the team, given that we have more than 40 different employees and 40 different team members in different countries. We kind of split up the team in a way where we would be able to kind of touch base with every single individual for 30 minutes to an hour every single week. We set up weekly syncs. And our job is to make sure that we ask them the right kind of questions and help them do their job better. So I'd go on that call, I'd be like, hey, person X, how can I help you do your job better? How can I help you accomplish more? How can I make sure that I kind of you overcome the obstacles that you're facing, right? And that's kind of built into the culture, like where I help that person and mentor that person into to doing his job better. But at the same time, I would give them that sense of, hey, I'm here for you if you ever need any sort of help. And that's actually also being.
So Ahmed, sorry to interrupt you, but I think some team leaders will be saying, "Whoa, okay, no, that sounds like a lot of work now." You contacting individuals throughout the week, because a lot of leaders are just used to having a team meeting on the first day, whether it's a Sunday or Monday, that the first day of the week, you have a team meeting, you set them up, and then you just let the team go. And maybe if you're in a physical environment, you sort of check in with people as you walk around the office. This is a different leadership approach, isn't it? So it's a mindset shift that's required, because you've got to be checking in with individuals maybe a lot more. And that's why technology is useful. Sorry, that ended up not being a question. It's more of a statement, but that sounds like what you're saying. It's a different leadership approach rather than just a new technology or a slight adjustment in your model.
Exactly, Graham. So when we first started, I was kind of micromanaging the team indirectly without feeling it. But when I found out through a survey that I was over micromanaging some people, I started to do some research online, and I kind of found out that the approach that we're talking about here is the best approach to go with. I should act as a mentor. I should guide them into doing their job in a better way. But like if you talk about the basics, if you talk about the fundamentals, I always hire people that are better than me, right? So if I want to hire someone to do some marketing work, I would hire the best marketing expert I can ever find. And that person is way better at doing marketing than I am. So they actually know how to do their job better. But my role as a leader is to make sure that there are no gaps, there are no obstacles, no issues or problems that this person is kind of facing, to make sure that, the work actually gets accomplished, and that person feels like if he gets a sense of that sense of belonging and feels like he's part of that team, right? The other thing that we do also on a daily basis.
Sorry again to interrupt you. So Aswati's asked a question. And by the way, people, this is the Q&A time. If you're watching your time, we've got about 10 minutes now. So if you haven't asked your question yet, please get it into the Q&A box. We are in question and answering mode now. So any questions you have, we'll pick up. But Aswati's asked, and this is a really great question, when would everything we've talked about today, so the healthy hybrid teams, being more adaptable, when would this not work? So in which environments might this not work? Now, it strikes me from what you've just said, you've said hire people who are better than yourself, mentor them, and sort of release them to do their work. If you're in an environment where the success factor is that the outputs are predictable, completely consistent, never varying, then maybe you wouldn't want to do this. I mean, the simple global example, of course, is McDonald's. You don't want somebody to try a different McDonald's burger when they come into work. A McDonald's burger has to be the same, taste the same every time somebody gets it. So we don't need all of these things if you're working in a McDonald's. If you want predictability, if you want consistency, if you don't want your frontline people to think for themselves, don't do this. But I think you're in danger then of not being able to keep up with change. I don't know if you see it in the same way. Ahmed, where do you think maybe being adaptable won't work?
I would say it wouldn't work in every single kind of business, right? If you have a very conventional business where there is not much innovation, not much creativity, the kind of work that the team members do is very routine based. You wouldn't really want to go with such approach, right? You might want to automate some of the tasks that they're actually working on and accomplishing and that sort of thing, but I don't think you would want to implement this framework. It's not really going to help you generate better output or improve the business one way or another.
Agreed. Sorry, but now thanks for a great question, and I hope that that's answered it. Just by the way, and I think, Ahmed, this will probably lead into a point that you want to make. There was one point I made earlier that I said I would come back to, and I'll come back to it in a second. But even if you're thinking this won't work for me or this won't work for our organization, I would encourage you to experiment. I would encourage you to try it anyway. And in a second, I'll just give you a brief outline of what I mean by experiment. That's going to be how I finish. But Ahmed, I know that that's something that's deep in your DNA at Codit, right? You guys try things. Sometimes it doesn't work, right? I mean, if you experiment with something, you might do it in a way where you think, oh, okay, that didn't quite work. But that's not a problem, right? That's part of what experimenting means. You try something, if it doesn't work, you back off, you try something else. Maybe you can give us some insights into what experimentation looks like for you.
Exactly. So I remember like at once I read a book about OKRs, objectives and key results, the OKR system. So I thought, hey, this is an amazing idea. If I implement it at Codit, it will improve things. It will help me make sure that we're accomplishing the big goals. It will make sure that like every single thing that every single employee is working on is actually mapped to the big picture, right? It's actually mapped to the vision of the company. And when I implemented it, at first things were okay, right? I asked the team members to actually work on their OKRs, because the OKR kind of structure is setting the objectives and the key results should come from the bottom to the top, like 40% from actually 60% from bottom to top, and then the 40% comes from the higher management, right? So when we first implemented it, things were fine. And then all of a sudden, I started like quarter after quarter, I started seeing that some team members are getting overburdened by the fact that they have to kind of set up their OKRs. They didn't know what kind of OKRs to have. So we started having more meetings just to kind of make sure that their OKRs are very specific, they're very measurable. And a few days after, we still saw that some of them were confused. So we decided to kind of roll back and go to the old structure. And immediately after we rolled back, we started seeing that things were becoming a little bit better. So it was more of an experiment. We wanted to implement it because a lot of big companies were using it, but that extra structure created an extra layer of complexity for the team members. So we immediately rolled back and things started to be okay again.
What a great example of that. So let me use that then to just say what I mean by experiment more. Because what a lot of people think about when we say experiment, I get a lot of senior leaders in particular saying to me, Graham, please don't tell my people to experiment more, because I'm really nervous that they're just going to burn the whole place down. You know, that we'll do something that'll just it'll cost too much money, it'll break things, the clients are going to hate us. So if the word experiment doesn't work for you, if you're nervous of that, then maybe the word question is better. So instead of saying let's experiment more, let's just say give your team permission to ask questions. Give your team permission to say, what happens if we tried something? Why do we do it this way? What else? How else could we do it? Then what you need to do is reduce the risk of that experiment as much as possible. And let me make that simple for you. I don't want you to think of 3 big experiments to do in the rest of this year. I want you to think of 30 experiments. You know, we often say, think big. I say the opposite. Think small, okay? Break up your big ideas into 10 small ideas. Why? Because each of those needs to be as risk-free as possible. Shouldn't cost a lot of money, shouldn't take a lot of time to work out if it's going to work or not. And we see what happens. So I've given you some nice examples today. Have a connection meeting, right? Try it for 3 weeks, for 15 minutes every Sunday morning or every Monday morning. See what happens. It's a question. Do we need to connect more? You can't really fail then, right? You can just reach a point of saying, well, that didn't really work for us. You share what happened, you learn from it, you try something else. Essentially what I'm saying is build a culture of experimentation, because you're not going to implement what we've been talking about today in one shot. Okay, you're not going to be able to do this just in once off. You're going to have to build it slowly, incrementally. But if you try something every week, every month, by the end of this year, you'll be really amazed at where you get to. Now, we are getting to the end of our time. We've given you plenty of opportunities to ask us questions. Ahmed, I'm going to come to you in a second to just give us your final thoughts, any inspiration maybe that you can give the people who've given us 2 hours as they think about what they must do for the future of work. And then we'll hand back to Rana and the team to just close us out. I just want to give you my contact details in case your questions only arrive in about 10 minutes time when we finished. I know that happens to me all the time. So please feel free to contact me, follow me on social media. I put out lots of free resources and I'm happy to connect with you in any ways. And of course, connect to NLI and make sure that you tap into all of their resources as well. But Ahmed, let me hand over to you just for the sort of last thought before we hand back to Rana, just some inspiration for everybody listening to us today. From my side, thank you.
Thank you, Graham. So I just want to say one last thing, which is that, you know, we kind of covered a lot of different topics and different ideas during your presentation, Graham. And I want to say that we actually managed to implement a lot of these thoughts into what we do on a daily basis at Coded. It worked for us here in Kuwait. Some people might think it's really difficult for them to actually implement some of these ideas in their own companies. But I would argue that it's not really that difficult. You just have to have the right kind of people in your team, start experimenting, and take it one step at a time. It might not work in the beginning. Like, we keep on changing things internally at Coded. We tried different experiments. A lot of them failed. And today we're at a position where we've implemented the majority of the points that Graham kind of explained as part of his 5-point framework. And we got to the point where we managed to make sure that things are going in a very smooth way, given that we have a hybrid team, a lot of people working in Kuwait, outside of Kuwait, and things are moving pretty smoothly. So just try to experiment, take it one step at a time. And if anyone needs any sort of guidance or help, Graham will be there of support, and I'll be supporting as well. You guys can easily reach me via social media. I'd be more than happy to kind of help you implement some of these thoughts in your own companies. Best of luck.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you, Graham. Thank you, Ahmed. And thank you, Rahul. I mean, I can confidently say that this has been one of the best sessions that we've ever had. All the topics, all the ideas, all the discussions were thoroughly enjoyable and something we can all take something out of it. So thank you again, Graham, and thank you, Ahmed. And thank you to our participants for joining us today, and we hope you enjoyed it as well. Our next conference will be after Ramadan, Digital Transformation and Culture on May 16th. Will be presented by Mark Gallagher with special guest Ahmed Al-Majid. Here is the trailer of our next conference, and thank you again for joining us. We will see you next time.
My name is Mark Gallagher, and my career has been spent working in the global sports business of Formula One motor racing. Today, I run my own consultancy business, which is called Performance Insights. I spent my career working in leadership roles in Formula One teams, and then talking to businesses around the world about what they can learn from the global sports business of Formula One. I'm going to be talking about the digital transformation journey, which the sport of Formula One motor racing has been on for the last 35 years. And it really is half of our history has been spent on the digital transformation journey. I'm going to be explaining what digital transformation is, what it means for us in terms of running businesses which are operating on the international stage. I'm also going to be giving insights into some very specific outcomes which have helped to revolutionize our business in so many areas, but most of all, put information and power in the hands of decision makers to improve business outcomes and to show how that's relevant to any business. Takeaways from my session are going to include the way in which digital transformation enables organizations to gain deep insight to themselves and to their customers in order to drive value and to drive more powerful outcomes. That's going to include the way in which we engage with customers on a much more effective basis, and indeed how we attract customers through using digital tools to improve our ability to offer added value goods and services to customers and to deliver improved customer service. I'm also going to be explaining how, during the course of the global pandemic, our digital strategies have enabled us to engage much more effectively with new demographics of consumers and actually accelerate business growth at a time of unprecedented challenge, and really once again show us how the digital tools and the digital environment really offers unprecedented opportunity for those who are prepared to embrace the technologies involved and the business insights that can be derived from them. I'm really looking forward to meeting all of you and to having a conversation with you at the NLI conference series. Looking forward to meeting you then.